some of the stuff and phone conversations I've had with this guy, he probably doesn't think he's revolutionary. The way he even presents it, he always kind of almost like says it like, oh, this isn't revolutionary, or you know this. But I don't know. The way he delivers it always makes me feel like I'm educated now, confident in direction, and just feel good about it. And he's just one of the best dudes in the space. Actually, a lot of the guys that we have interviewed here that are the most impressive people have all talked about how he was one of the early mentors for them. So a lot of big people in our industry have looked to him for guidance. So, and he's like the most humble guy in the world. And his wife Sally's out there, who's one of the nicest people I've ever met. So thank you so much for being here, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love it. I mean, yeah, first of all, I just want to say, like, Lustig hit on it earlier today. I feel the same way. I start every day with gratitude. I have my little prayer. It's private. I say it every day. I'm grateful for so many things. I'm grateful for this country. I'm grateful for the opportunity that we have just to be able to start from nothing and just grow an incredible business. And, eventually, if you do it right, have generational wealth. It's just an awesome thing. And, that this industry provides that for us. I'm also grateful for friends in the industry. I mean, I come in a place like this and, I've got a little skip in my step because these are my people. And so I love it. And I'm grateful for my wife because I would not be here on this stage if it wasn't for her. She supported me through the early days. She was right there by my side financially, psychologically. Didn't have a lot of people to turn to, so give it up for Sally, please. Yeah.
Awesome, man. That's right away, true testament to this dude's character, man. He's just all around good person and an easy person to want to aspire to be like in a lot of different ways. And and even as I say that, I know he thinks that he's like, oh, I'm not a big deal, So he always is. It's so funny. But I don't know. That always attracts me more to someone is when they're really impressive, but they don't even have to tell anybody, that people just know, right? But we want to dive in. And I call you Dante. Everybody says Richard, but do you care if we say Dante? We're a room of friends, right?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, Dante Cantu. No more Richard Cantu.
It's Richard Dante Cantu. The only reason I was going by Richard in the industry, for the most part, was when you fill out your applications to be appointed and get your license, it's first name, last name. So people start knowing me as Richard Cantu, but some of y'all may not know this, but I'm out of the industry now. And I'm like, hey, if I'm out of the industry, I'm going back to Dante.
Yeah, this is Dante.
So it's Dante. That's what my wife calls me. That's what my family calls me.
Yeah, well, I actually got introduced to you as Dante, so I started calling you that from the get-go. And then when people would say, so many people would say Richard, formally, and I'm like, oh, am I somehow in the inner circle of Dante Norris? So, no, but dude, we met originally in Bora Bora.
Yeah,
on a Manhattan Life trip.
That was a great trip.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was probably one of the best carrier trips I've been on. I think you've been on several. So, but we had a great time right away. You guys were great, and that was probably towards the time where you were starting to get towards getting out of the industry. Go Medigap was, I guess, in full stride back then. So,
yeah.
And it was one of those, if you go Google Medicare and Go Medigap was popping right up at the top. It was a dominating force. But you met this guy, and I'd probably spent a couple of days there and had a couple of conversations here and there, and still didn't even know he owned Go Medigap. He just didn't walk around talking like that. It's more personable. But one of the things that I think that you're exceptional at, there are things early on that you're exceptional at, but you'll tell me now, I don't know anything about SEO. It's evolved too much. So I don't want to talk about that. But one of the things you did really well was bringing the right people together and creating a culture that people would want to work in. And that's something that I aspire to do and try to do because we love our team. And it was on full display for real when what was Sarah from Optimize Ad was out there and was on one of the OG Go Medigap agents as soon as they came up, it was like, hugs, like, hey, it's just clearly like they liked this guy. He wasn't Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
So not a knock on Steve Jobs, but different type of leadership style. This is a guy that they just really seem to enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, culture really, when it comes down to it, when you're building a team, building a company, I mean, that's really the core of it. And I think a lot of y'all know that. And, I had to learn that the hard way, starting off as just being me for the first several years, hiring a couple of people. I started to understand a lot about, I think I brought on the right people initially. I don't know that I maybe guided them in the right way, or maybe just some things happened. But over the time, I just learned a lot of painful lessons about culture. And, for me, it's the main thing. It's set the expectation of who the company is, how we operate, and then, encourage them, manage them, train them, support them, get them up and running, make sure they're experts in being successful. And part of that is, unfortunately, some people aren't going to fit that culture over time. Yeah. So there's a lot of responsibility to manage that culture, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah.
Well, how do you think? Where was the point where, from my perspective, when I'm building a team, and this has happened more and more, like it's like I don't feel like I did it, but it just happened over time. But it seems like my team has pride in our brand, pride in our mission, and pride in, the way people perceive us. And I don't know, I hope that I've a bit helped that. But did you see a path on or a step process or anything like that to make your people really feel like they're part of a team? Like, this isn't a job, this is where I want to be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first several years of hiring people, I know I didn't have a mission. I mean, not a defined mission. I mean, I did, but it wasn't defined. I didn't have defined core values. It's something that I knew I had to do at some point. I just was working on so many things. I just really hadn't spent the mental cycles to figure that out. And I would say, we ran a good company up until the point that we defined those those. And then it just became a great company after we had defined those things. And every time we hired someone, we really looked to hire them to those core values, people that were passionate about the mission. There's a process for that. But so it was probably 14, 15 when we started to shift that. And then yeah, it was just, we were consistently hiring the right people.
Do you think when the culture became that of which the majority of the people really bought in and really enjoyed being there and really felt like a family, that the business skyrocketed after that? Is that, or the what is that curve kind of began to increase? Or
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you implement. I mean, it's all of the support processes, creating efficiencies in the business, the ability to ramp people quickly, great training processes, and of course the culture. We had a lot of fun. Part of that was, giving back to the community, which was very important to us, and it was important to them. I think a lot of people look for an outlet to be able to do things like that, give back to the community. When you can do it through the business, it kind of gives them this connection with, the community, with each other. Our mission was, just give you the mission, it was to be the most trusted Medicare supplement insurance agency in the country, treating our clients as we would our own parents. And while that sounds pretty basic, there's a lot of thought that went into that, because ultimately it was treat these people like we would our own parents, and that's treat them with respect. Make sure that you fully understand their situation and what they're looking for, and educate them, give them options, help them make a decision, and then take care of them on the back end. So I think we were probably one of the first companies to actually have a retention team. And the retention team was not necessarily put in place because we were concerned about long-term retention, although I think a lot of people are starting to realize that is an issue, especially with larger call centers. The retention team was put in place because if we're truly going to treat them like we would our own parents, and we have this expertise, the thought was we should be checking back with them on an annual basis to make sure that policy is still the right policy for them. So that was the initial intent. And of course, we understood the benefit on the back end that once they became a client of ours, there should never be a need for them to go anywhere else. And that's the way that we built out the company and took care of them. So I think when we hired people that first and foremost, they were good people. They wanted to take care of our clients. And when we showed that we were doing that, we were actually investing in that, and we were staying true to that. People felt empowered, proud, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, we kept constant communication. So, we'd have weekly all hands meetings, quarterly reviews, where we just bring everybody together and we talk about the stuff that went right, the stuff that went wrong, goals, whether or not we were hitting them, a lot of incentives. And then we created I sent you some notes on this, but our thought was let's create an environment where everyone wins, and that means the carriers, our clients, all the employees. We had outstanding benefits. We really built an environment where, I think if you ask any one of them, outside of just the financial side, they probably made more money than they ever had before, and it didn't matter what the role was, and we were very thoughtful about that, and had great benefits, and a lot of them were able to were able to develop in the way that we supported them and develop the right mindset, and so I think you can ask just about anybody in those days that went through Go Medigap, whether or not it was an inflection point in their life, and I think they would say that it probably was.
Yeah. Well, that's what we want that to be that way, and anybody that's building a business should be thinking about that because it's very important. And also, there's a shift where he's probably on the forefront of that, especially in our industry. But really, I hear a lot of people that are struggling to hire people. They're struggling to retain people, to keep people, and I just don't think it's stated enough how important culture, paying people well. Our goal is to try to pay people more than they could make elsewhere. Because I don't want them to. I don't want to have to choose between working for our awesome company in our space and making $3 more an hour or something. So
right.
I want to pay them at that rate where we don't have to compete with that. I can just head it off at the pass. And I didn't learn that out of the gate. That's just something that's kind of evolved even recently in some ways.
Yeah.
But another thing you did was you guys had a dog-friendly work environment. That is something I still, because I brought my dog in before, and one day she, who was in the office that she threw up on and then started peeing on somebody.
Yeah.
I think it was one of our employees. It was Sid. She threw up on you, Sid? Oh, man. Then she went over to Trey and tried to pee on him or something like that. I didn't know what was going on, so I was like, okay, my dog clearly is not well behaved enough. But you had a dog-friendly work environment. I have to know. I think at one time I saw on your website you had profiles for a lot of the team members, and they'd have pictures of their dogs in some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We love that. It's I'm a dog lover. My wife wasn't necessarily until more recently. She always was the one to feed the dog.
Yeah.
But she didn't grow up being a dog lover. But we love dogs. It started off by me taking my dog to the office, and then as we started hiring people, they'd ask, like, can I bring up my dog? I'm like, absolutely. So we always had anywhere from 1 to 3 dogs in the office, and we had our protocols.
Even when you were telling me when you were hiring people, it was like they had to be dog people, or they couldn't come there.
That was a question in our interview process. I don't know if that's legal or not, but
we discriminate against people that cat people.
Sorry, any cat people. But
Jeff. Well, I don't know where Jeff is. Jeff is our CDO. There he is. That's my cat man back there.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, if you love dogs, you love people for the most part. I think some people love dogs more than people, but yeah, if you love dogs, you're probably a good person. If you check all the other boxes.
That's what you told me. You said we decided that if you love dogs, you're probably a good person.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No, that was really funny. I've never seen that in another company, but it makes sense the more I know you, that you would do something like that, because it just seemed to me that although you're probably one of the pioneers of just backwards engineering LTV, the way Bob talks about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of those guys. You got the spreadsheet even like breaks down like ancillary attachment rates and your average commission and your what your CPA is and like your compounding renewal value. You have probably one of the most thought out ones I've ever seen, and you're kind of a numbers guy, and then you're a tech guy because you brought in software engineers and paid them more than most people would probably been like, why are you doing that? That's a lot of money. It's a drain.
Yeah.
But then in the end, it ended up being a big portion of why people were interested in you too, and interested in your company on the tech side. So,
yeah.
But to be a numbers guy and a tech guy in the,
and a sales guy and a marketing guy.
And a sales guy, and but to
Yeah.
be that person doesn't always correlate to being somebody who loves quality culture and
Yeah.
enjoys building a team like that. So, it's kind of well-rounded for that. So,
Well, let me tell you what that's about. So everybody gets into this industry for different reasons and in different ways. I had a degree in marketing. I never used it. I was in sales, and I worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, worked for a couple of startups, and every one of those companies had layoffs. And I started to realize like a lot of these companies are not well run, and they look at human resources as just that, human resources. They're not looking at them as humans. And I ultimately got laid off. So January 3rd, 2005, I got laid off. And so my entry into the insurance world was
got to do something.
Fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, I had job offers. I was in the tech space, but it just was fortunate that I got laid off because I started thinking about it. 2 Fortune 500 companies, 2 startups. Do I really want to go back into that, or do I want to start my own business? And considering all of the different areas that you can get into, you spoke about it a little bit earlier. Insurance is recession-proof.
Yeah.
I mean, you can really create your own schedule. You can work as hard as you want. There's opportunity for growth. You could scale it. And I thought, I'm a smart guy. I'm good at sales. Man, I'll tell you, and some of y'all are experiencing this now. Yes, I've been successful. The first 3 to 5 years, there were a lot of moments where I was deciding whether or not to stay in the business. And I know that some of y'all are dealing with that right now. And I've spoken with some of y'all in these past couple of days. And y'all have talked about it on the stage, and it's very true. Take the punches, learn from it, and constantly figure out ways to improve your business. And I think that's kind of what's happened over time is, I wasn't a math genius. I wasn't great at spreadsheets. I wasn't even great at building technology or systems. But I obsessed over how to make the business better. How do we become more efficient? And I looked at all of the issues that we had. And when you're trying to hire salespeople, and you look at Medicare supplements specifically, I mean, just understanding the sales process itself, understanding things like CRM systems, there's a learning curve. But then you get into things like medical underwriting, and you have to teach them medical underwriting. And I'm watching these people, I'm training them, and I'm watching them. And some might ramp in 4 months, some might ramp in 6, 9, some didn't ramp at all over time. But one of the biggest hurdles we had early on was underwriting. And so, and then going from an individual producer to hiring people, and you've heard other people talk about it today. I mean, there's a sense of responsibility. When I think back about human resources and me getting laid off, and these companies making bad decisions, there's this burden I think that you feel to make sure that you make the right decisions. And so I started obsessing over spreadsheets and all of those different areas. You just think about how to improve the business on a day-to-day basis. And we talked about it a little bit. Sometimes people think if I don't make it in a year, if I don't make it in 2 years, I'm out. I mean, that whole first probably 3 to 5 years is really finding traction, sustainability. It's painful. But once you get past that 3 to 5 years, that's where you can start, making money that you might not have thought you could make before, building incredible environments and systems. And so I stumbled through the first, I did pretty well, but I stumbled through the first couple of years. I got punched in the mouth over and over, but thanks to Sally, I was able to kind of fight through it. And well,
it worked out well.
Yeah, it worked out okay. Can't complain too much.
So it's kind of the 3 feet from gold concept. People that are sometimes they're giving up, or they're thinking, am I really there? They really are potentially 3 feet from gold.
Yeah, absolutely. And what happens is you become distracted by other things. And so it really was. There were times early on where I thought, like, maybe I should just go, and you've heard other people say this up here, maybe I should just go find a job. I'm not making as much money as I made when I was working for someone else. But man, there's so many things that go through your head, and probably some of y'all as well. Like, hey, I started this. I'm not the type to fail. And what will people think if I abandon what I started and gave into something else, working for somebody else? And what's my life going to look like if I did that? Hopefully some of y'all are too. I like to learn from other people's mistakes. I saw the 45, 50-year-old guys getting laid off. And I didn't want to be in that position. And I knew that, like, if I was ever going to make it happen, it was going to be, on my own. So all that really, really pushed me through those early years.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you go get that job, and I heard an Entre Leadership podcast one time. Old Dave Ramsey, Pete loves him. Where you at, Pete? Pete loves Dave Ramsey. But at the Entre Leadership podcast, he had Mark Cuban on there one time, and they said, having a job sometimes can be like being self-employed with one client.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I thought it was funny. So I mean,
absolutely.
there's a lot of risk in everything. There's not like it's not like having a job is foolproof. Like, things happen.
Yeah.
So the security you feel like you're getting from that may not be there. And the same thing about being self-employed. Most people that go into it drastically underestimate really what the timeline for feeling a stride or success is. I try to tell people now that the first 3 to 5 years they should prepare to suck shit.
Yeah.
Basically sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have some crazy wins, but those are more like anomalies.
Yeah.
Most of the guys and people that you see doing well, even when you started to scale and had a process, it was like almost everything you were making for the most part, and I think allude to this, almost everything you made would go straight back to the business just to keep it afloat and growing because you believe in a vision. I mean, what did you pay yourself? Because I know you paid yourself pretty low for a long time.
So once I started making good money, prior to getting an insurance, I was a 6-figure tech sales guy. Once I started building the business and I started, obsessing over spreadsheets, and I understood the value of the return of an investment in a dollar in my business, I realized that I needed to have, I need to invest everything I could in the business. So Sally and I looked at our bills and, what we needed to be able to get by on a regular basis. Didn't really need more than that. I mean, Sally and I are pretty simple. And I paid myself $50,000 a year for the first 5 years.
Yeah.
That was even after hiring people. I had salespeople making, $100,000 to $150,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I paid myself $50,000 a year.
You hear that? You hear inside salespeople making, upwards of triple what he was paying himself, running the whole thing, taking all the risk. That's something that people just have a hard time understanding, that most of the large groups that you see don't do that. I mean, even, Jagger and David, now I see them splurging a little bit finally, but for a long time, it was like, these are these big shots. They're writing all this med stuff. They're writing so much volume, but they really didn't spend a lot of money. Like, really, they didn't.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything but work all the time, right? Yeah. Which for me was great, because it was like, well, that's what I got to do. That's just the way I thought. Like, I just emulate, I'm going to sit at home, and I didn't spend a lot. I spend a little now.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to get there. I didn't buy a lot of stuff for myself. My weakness would be buying stuff for my family, maybe.
Yeah.
But even then, I remember having substantial income, but so much of it going back out because I believed in it, and then just taking like a week to Destin would be like 20. I was telling my wife this. She was like, I don't ever remember it being stressful. I was like, I do. I remember spending that $2,000 on a condo and being like, that I don't have $2,000 for a condo, and having to go down there and make sales calls from the condo while they were on the beach.
It's crazy. I mean, up until 2000, right around 2008, I was on leaderboards in the under 65 market, and I think a lot of people probably thought I did really well. And I was still trying to build up my renewal base as I was switching to Medicare supplements, which was great. Anyways, I moved for a reason, And going into my third year, and I've shared this with a few people, and these are the things that you run into and you have to run into, and it's it's humbling, but you look back on it from this position, several years later, a decade later, or decade plus later, and you're like, yeah, that was kind of cool. It sucked at the time, but it's kind of cool to look back on that. Third year, going into the third year, I had figured things out, but still trying to build up a renewal base. Under 65 market, paid as earned, so it took a while to build up those renewals.
Yeah.
And I was into my spreadsheets, and I knew my cost of acquisition, and it was fairly low because I'd got pretty good at SEO and pay-per-click. And we wanted to take her out for our anniversary. I told her when I got an insurance, I said, listen, if I'm going to do this, there's no new clothes, no movies, no dinners, no. I mean, I knew like it's going to suck. Like this is going to be, trying times financially. So going into the third year, I thought I'm going to treat her to dinner. So she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. So we go out and we go to the hibachi place, and they've got this foyer. We walk in and the menus are there, and I realize that the plates are $25 a piece. And then I start doing that. I'm like, we'll probably want a couple of drinks. This is gonna be like $90. At the time, I had a $15 COA, about a 25% close rate. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is not a $100 dinner. This is like a $1,500 dinner. Because I was thinking about the conversion and the money that would come from that. And that's just how you start thinking when you get crazy about it.
Yeah.
And so I honestly, she'll attest. I looked at her and I said, do you mind if we go somewhere else? One of the most embarrassing things I ever had to do, but she understood. And so we walked back out.
I guess you guys have some decent dinners now, though, right?
Yeah. That's some great.
At the ranch.
Yeah, at the ranch. Yeah.
So, well, I can attest to that. Sometimes you get a ride or die. My wife made it through me going to Iraq and dragging her to Japan and having babies in, hospitals in Japan with. By the way, the doctors there when they're delivering babies are not coddling at all. They're like, you're not ready.
Yeah.
I come back later, and then they just and it's really. So having a 9-pound, 2-ounce completely natural birth over there, and then dragging her to insurance and becoming obsessed and doing some of the same things. And so some people just love you no matter what.
Yeah. She's a good Catholic girl. She doesn't believe in divorces.
There you go. Hey, I hope we can get you back in time for Mass. You guys can do Mass here.
Yeah.
So, that's, you have a great story, but that's the spreadsheet and the number side. I just think, I keep telling people, it becomes a common theme throughout. I don't mean to say it, but with every group, and you start talking about these upward trajectories of businesses, it's like you're in Medicare because you believe in the compounding residual income, but you really don't understand it because it's much bigger than you think it is.
Yeah.
And the residual, the compounding attention, the compounding referral base, the compounding ability of your team to sell more and more efficiently, the ability of your team to retain more. Like Jagger is even talking about, eventually your overhead costs can decrease because of certain parts of the infrastructure. So you can then, and see what some people would be doing is to say, well, now I have I can pull this out. I can have a higher margin. He already knows, well, now I can afford to increase my lead costs because I'm pulling my overhead costs down. Like these breaking points in businesses that you don't get, but they're all compounding metrics that end up being potentially, tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's really crazy because you get some insights as you really start to understand your numbers. And there's a lot of folks that try to drive as low a COA as possible or CPA as possible, and it might not be the right thing to do. And Bache was trying to explain that when he was up here on stage and started throwing out numbers. And I won't bore you with getting into detailed numbers, but the way to think about it is, if you have a lower COA and you're going with lower quality leads, like maybe a Facebook lead, a straight Facebook lead, we know that that's passive intent, somebody that just happened to be looking at people's pictures and they saw an ad and like, maybe I'll take a look. They're not really in the market. You might be able to convert them, but you're going to convert them at a lower rate. Versus turning 65, PPC ad or lead or SEO lead, or let's say PPC because there's a higher cost. It might be okay to have that higher cost because if you can close 3 Medicare supplements in a day, getting a handful of those great PPC leads, and you have a $400, $500 CPA on each one, but you think about like the total profit that you're bringing in that day, even with the higher COAs, and you understand your limitation of time. If it's just you in the seat. If it's your salespeople, you only have so many salespeople. They only have so much time in the day. And so one of the things that I figured out over time is that the metric that you should measure by is not COA. The metric that you should measure by is what is the total profit driven per seat per day. And so I hear somebody gets that. And so think about that because a lot of people don't understand it to that level. And it took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah. Because, the CPA and the lifetime value tells the story of one sale, really. And when you start talking about multiplying seats and you realize how much profit's coming from each seat per day, and then you start to decide, well, how many seats do I really want? Like, I want as many as I can get if the profit is good.
Yeah,
so, and then there's different breaking points in there where, like he was talking about, diminishing or increasing CPA, diminishing overhead, maybe even diminishing LTV if you get too big. But those are all concepts that you evolve into, I feel like, and you just have to get through one point at a time. Some people are trying to get to have enough revenue to even be able to figure out how to hire people, and then other people are, have the revenue and they're trying to figure out who do I hire, how do I hire them, what do I have them do, how do I create scalable lead flow.
Yeah,
and that's a big thing, scalable lead flow. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's sending out direct mail for inbound calls, all these different things. Referral-based businesses are great, but it's very difficult to scale that. It takes a long time to build. So a lot of our audience will have healthy, 6-figure business that they've built, a referral-based business, but now they're kind of potentially a prisoner to that business, and it's plateaued.
Yeah.
But it's a hell of a way to get started. People, going out and building referrals. Like, I'm not knocking that. We get a lot of referrals, and I love the fact that we get that. Drives your total CPA down. But
and you got to start somewhere. I mean, first 2 to 3 years. I mean, biggest thing is, where do I get leads? And I've talked to a few that are in their first or second year, and they're trying to figure that out, and they're concerned, and so you might have to settle for lower cost, lower CPA, first 2 or 3 years. But you start building that renewal base, and you keep that going, and it continuously builds from year to year. You just have a lot more leverage, obviously, over time, and so you can go drive those higher COAs, knowing it's going to take a little bit longer to return an investment, but the investment is significantly greater.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about scaling over time.
So as you get into, it's pretty much no secret, Go Medigap sold to eHealth eventually.
Yeah.
And that was a process. You're the one that told me, by the way, that I think I said it earlier. I don't know if I said it was you that said it, but you're the one that told me that when you went to sell and I guess you got further down that, maybe even initially, but when you got farther down that journey, it felt like you were sending a kid off to college or something like that. There was some emotional, toll after building and obsessing over it and all you went through for it.
I mean, oh man. Yeah. I was fortunate, blessed to have had a family member sell a business, my stepfather, when I was younger, sell a business, and he did it pretty quickly. And I don't think he had an opportunity to kind of reconcile with the fact that he was no longer going to be leading that organization. And it was his baby because he put his blood, sweat, and tears into it, built it into what it was, and he had a lot of heartache from it afterwards. So I saw that, and I knew as we were getting close to completing the acquisition that I needed to reconcile that for myself. So there is a big portion of that when you work that hard and that long and you put that much into it and you create something that's special, then it can be painful. But I came to accept it as that. Like at some point, you know, kids go to college and you got to let them free in the world. And hopefully when you're making the decision, you're doing it in the right way and you did everything to set it up to be successful after you're gone. And so, yeah, it does feel like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but now that you're completely done and you're in, so now this was crazy. I think I was having a conversation with you a while back when you were getting into the roofing company. I think you took off when you got completely free and clear of your, having to be beholden to anyone.
Yeah.
You took some time off. What, a little bit?
Listen, I mean, I've been blessed to have good timing. Some of it was thought out, some of it was luck. I moved out of the under 65 space in 2008. I sold that under 65 business in 2009. And then shortly after, for a number of reasons, ACA passed. And so I kind of dodged that bullet. The guy that I sold it to made some money. I gave it to him pretty cheap. I sold it to him pretty cheap. But he didn't make as much as he and I had both hoped for him. So I got out of that. My 2 years with eHealth ended January 17, 2020. What was it? March. COVID hit. Everybody had to go home. I had to scramble to build systems. I would have been in that dogfight, and I would have been okay with it. But I feel blessed to have missed that because it seems like it could have been a mess. So yeah, took some time off. I mean, I really was at a point, again, blessed to have gone through that acquisition from a financial standpoint, and I was considering just retiring. I don't always kind of thought like maybe I want to retire when I'm 50. When I was about that age. So we thought about it. We had some personal projects, the ranch. We built a new house. We'd been in the same house since I got in insurance. Yeah. We built a new house, moved into the new house during that time. And yeah, it was good timing for me to get out. But then I had a 2-year non-compete. 15 months went by, and the guy that helped me build my ranch house was the Owens Corning rep in San Antonio, and he was a childhood friend. And he'd been the Owens Corning rep for 20 years. And it's kind of like that, when I entered this space in 2008, there weren't a lot of online call center operators. So I certainly wasn't the first, but I was one of the first, and I'm, one that had longevity. But I got in the space because I saw an opportunity. I saw really that it was underserved. There's a lot of people in the space now, so I think it's well served to some extent if people have the right intent. But he approached me about starting a roofing business, and I don't know anything about construction. I wasn't, it's kind of it's like, I wouldn't say insurance is shady. I'd say construction's shady. And so I wasn't sure if I wanted to be associated with it. He bugged me, and I was like, send me the numbers, with my spreadsheets. And I looked at it, I'm like, okay, of course, like this thing can be very profitable. We can build a great business. I started doing some research, and I realized like there are not a lot of sophisticated operators in the space. Yeah. And everything that I had learned, and that's one of the things that you and I talked about, is the beauty of all this is not the financial aspect of it. I mean, it's beautiful, yes. The fact that I don't have to worry about money ever again. Knock on wood.
There have to be some pretty severe inflation.
Yeah. Or super dumb decisions, which I won't make.
Yes, they're really bad decisions.
Yeah. So it's what you become. I mean, and we talked about that a little bit. And when I say what you become, it's like everything that I had to develop that I probably wouldn't have developed if I had not been laid off, gotten this space, and just been driven to eventually be successful. And so taking everything that I've learned in the insurance space and then applying it to the roofing business, and then having the capital to be able to invest quickly, because when you start off on your own, you're actually, when you're bootstrapping, which was what I had to do in insurance, you have to wait for that income to build over time.
You get the revenue to finance the endeavor.
Absolutely. So it's been a lot of fun to get in the roofing industry. But everything that I've learned over the previous 15 years has been applied into that business, and it's been really cool. I've got 2 business partners, and they're from the roofing industry, and they're operating on a day-to-day basis. I helped structure the business, and I helped really just kind of build everything out. And I remember signing our partnership. It was actually April 1st of last year. And we sat down and I said, I want you to understand something. Like right now, we're signing a piece of paper, and we're going to create something out of nothing. It doesn't exist right now, and I want us to understand how powerful this can be, in a good way or a bad way. And I intend it to be, we intend to be it in a good way. And we spent the first 5 months just doing planning, getting everything ready. And it wasn't an over-analyzing. It was making sure that when we started hiring people that it was the right environment. So all the culture stuff, going in with a mission, going in with values, in with a vision, setting a 5-year plan, building out a pro forma for 3 years, deciding what type of person we wanted to bring on and how we would manage them, and building out the ads to be able to hire people. We started going, we started bringing people on, and most everybody we brought on, 90% of them were incredible people. They were all incredible people. Some of them just weren't the right fit. We found out pretty quickly. And we're going to make some bad decisions. But we just celebrated our 1 year, and we're 53 employees. We're going to be a $20 million business. #1 residential roofing company in San Antonio. 176 as of a little while ago. 5-star reviews. We've been selling for like 6 months, and the culture is incredible. I mean,
that's awesome.
You don't see it in the space, at least in San Antonio. And so when you talk about like how do you get people like excited, there's people joining us that has never seen this in the roofing space, and they want to be a part of it. And again, we hire in a certain way, which we might talk about that too. But we got a ton of momentum. Some pretty significant plans. That $20 million was actually our 5-year plan, so we actually pulled it all forward to the first year.
They're happy. Your partners, they picked the right. Because I'm sure they came to you like, oh well, this will be we got another investor to help us get off the ground, but really you have the mind for that CFO kind of construct, and really that you could apply that to any business.
And it's crazy because it's simple stuff. When I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, San Antonio's our market. I've never done traditional marketing, so I'm having a lot of fun figuring that out. A lot of branding and things like TV and radio and billboards and trying to understand like how do we determine a cost of acquisition from those investments, and we really don't.
It's way different.
Yeah.
Everybody, when y'all are talking about it, people are like, "What's your cost per acquisition?" I'm like, healthy.
Yeah.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
I can't remember what movie that was. He said, "Don't you worry about my numbers." Oh, it was the Big Short. They said, "What are your margins?" Don't worry about my margins.
Yeah.
My margins are good.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about it is, with local, it's different, right? Because you're building a brand, and you want to be top of mind. So when somebody
it's very difficult to in the local market because there's some other people that have done great jobs at this, but maybe in Medicare we're probably at the foremost of that local branding concept, and and that's what you're doing now, and it is very difficult to use general math to price the long-term effect of subconscious market inundation.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to slice it, and you can figure it out kind of at a high level, but it's been kind of fun because we talked about Tyler being disruptive. In the sleepy niche of roofing, we're pretty disruptive, at least in the San Antonio space, and we've got billboards all over town. And it's funny because we moved into a town just north of San Antonio called New Braunfels, and we're moving into Austin eventually. Within 5 years, we're going to be.
Ron, do you need a new roof? he's over in New Braunfels.
Yeah, it's a great place to be. But Rhino Roofers, I don't know if you've seen our billboards. Rhino Roofers, yeah.
Look at that, it's working. So you're inundating him.
Yeah, well, we're trying, and so it's We moved billboards into New Braunfels. We have some salespeople that live there, and so they wanted to be able to kind of concentrate on that area. We're going to move into Austin eventually.
So you don't think they'll all you did with Go Medigap, like to build it that fast and to, supercharge that goal, like without that information, even if you had capital, it wouldn't have went that well, right? I mean, like you kind of knew the prior proper planning that you needed to do because of some of the past lessons learned in the other space.
I mean, starting fresh at this point with a new business, new industry, new niche, something I didn't know anything about. But understanding how important culture is, processes, systems, CRM systems, marketing. I'm having fun learning about branding. I think we built a pretty cool brand. We get a lot of compliments on our trucks and other stuff, but yeah, I don't think it would have gone smoothly. I mean, and basic things, like one of the first things I did before we even had formed a partnership was addressable market. And I asked my business partner, what's the addressable market? And I asked him in that way because I just wanted to see if he knew what it was. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, how many houses are there in San Antonio? And he's like, I don't know. Quick Google search, there's over 600,000 homes. I was like, all right, so how often do they replace their roof? On average, every 20 years. Okay, so you're telling me that there's about 30,000 roofs that have their roofs replaced in the San Antonio market.
Each year,
$2,500 a month on average. Now, it's a little seasonal. And a lot of roofing companies, if you know anything about them, they'll chase storms. They'll, a storm hits, couple hundred miles away, they'll send their entire sales team there and they'll spend months there. And one thing that we decided is we're going to stay put. We're not going to physically or psychologically chase storms, because the psychological part is salespeople in the roofing space and even roofing company owners will say there's an on-season, there's an off-season, storm season and off-season. And so right around November, December, January, February, and even March, they'll take time off. Hey, good lifestyle business, I guess.
People that do that in insurance that have been independent guys that are, been in it for a while, and they'll try to like take off hunting season and stuff. And then I'll get referrals coming in back when I was and I'm like, what? I don't understand that.
So January is probably one of the worst months. And, our first sales guy, an average roofing sales guy, actually 1 million is the mark, 1 million in contract value. So about 85,000 a month is considered a good sales rep. Our initial sales guy who had been with us, understood our processes, had built a pipeline, wrote 300,000 in contract value in January.
What's roof? Because I've seen roofing sales kind of become a thing, and not the roofing infrastructure behind it. Like you guys kind of doing. You're going A to Z. You're doing the whole thing, sales to application and actually roofing.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, and this is all, but like, what's a roofing commission average?
Yeah, and I know that's not a roofing
no, I'm
roof con.
This is roofing con.
But I think the message
it's interesting because you learned all those most of those business lessons in Medicare, and then you go to another business and boom,
Yeah.
So
so what was the question again?
What's the average roofing salesperson's commission? Like
10% of contract value.
Okay. He did pretty well in January.
Yeah. So that guy's goal is 250,000 in income this year, and we can set up the environment that even with we spend. I'll throw out some numbers. We spend, and I'm sure you probably spend a lot more, but between all marketing, San Antonio market only, about $125,000 a month in marketing, and we can create this place where everybody wins. The homeowner. The suppliers, our employees, they're all in a position to make more money than they have ever have, and still be profitable, nice. Highly profitable, because of volume, driving a lot of volume. So I think the bottom line with it is, build the right culture, hire the right people. We might talk about that a little bit. I don't know how much time we have.
We got a few more minutes. So hire the right people.
Yeah.
What you said earlier, you're hiring different, now, which I'm guessing because you put culture at the forefront.
Yeah.
So what is that hiring practice? Would it apply to any industry really as a process?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Because we were doing it at Go Medigap, prior to the acquisition. So it works. A lot of times people will hire someone that's like, hey, my buddy is looking for a job and, he wants to come on board. And, you think like, okay, well, I can probably support him, do an interview. You like the person. There's actually a book that I read a while back because I fell in this trap myself. And it's called You Like Them, and then what can they sell? And it's funny because there are some very likable people out there that you think can come on board and sell, and then they can't. They don't have the motivation. They can certainly sell you during the interview, but and then maybe they're not really kind of a culture fit. So I look at the hiring process as a sales process. Like there's going to be a number of leads, which are your resumes. There's going to be a close rate, which is like 1% intentionally. And there's going to be a cost associated with it. So, if I run ads in LinkedIn and Indeed, I'm going to spend $18 a resume. I'm going to get 100 resumes. I'm going to hire one person. And kind of the ratio is I'll get 100 resumes. I'll sift through them and I'll probably call 15 to 20. Or actually, I'll sift through them, I'll pick out 15 to 20. I'll put it aside for a day because I've learned to do that. Because then I pick it up the next day and I look at those resumes again. I'm like, why did I even choose this one? So I'll start, tossing those out, and then I'll get it down to like 10, and then I'll call all 10. Some won't answer, some will, and then ultimately I'll get it down to 3 to 5 to bring them in for an interview with the sales leaders. And so right now, early in the business, I'm doing a lot of that, but I'm also showing my business partners how to do that. And so we're very highly selected, but we do a long form ad, and everything about the culture is in there. The earnings potential, our mission, our vision or values, expectations of the job. And so when people are applying for that, they have a pretty good understanding. One of the questions I just love to ask is, and some of y'all may do this as well, what most interested you about working with us? And what I want to hear is like, you're different. I see your mission. I want to be a part of that. And you start hearing these certain things that you're looking for, and they're all in. And we look for, and this is not my thing, smart, hungry, humble. So we want to make sure that they're smart enough to be able to do the job, that they're hungry enough to want to go beat expectations, and that they're humble enough to learn. And so a lot of our questioning, is around all of that. Are you smart, hungry, and humble? We actually even put that in our...
Patrick Lencioni.
Yes, you got it.
Ultimate team player.
There you go. Yeah.
You told me to read it.
Yeah.
So I got it. I actually gave a copy to Jeff and I think Steven. So
yeah,
it's a good book. So if you guys hadn't got that, check out Patrick Lencioni's Ultimate Team Player. What he's talking about, being smart, hungry, and humble, is great takeaways. And then also the idea that he's got an $1,800 CPA on an employee. $1,800 to acquire someone that you have to pay, but then hopefully turns into a great asset.
What I've learned is hiring the wrong person is so much more expensive. Not just financially, but in your time. Because once you hire someone, you want to invest in them. And what you find is that your lower performers, you tend to spend more time with them. And so we want to be very, very careful that we're not bringing on people that are burdens. I don't know if you want to go over the ship analogy.
You go over the ship analogy. Do it.
This is just something.
I can't cut you off. People that want to listen are just going to have to stay.
Some people don't like this analogy, but the way I look at it is, when we build a business and we bring people on board, it's like a ship. The ship is a company, and we are in close quarters. So we all are having to deal with each other, and in the right environment, you're supporting each other, and people fit in one of three categories, at least in my mind. They are engines on this ship. They're pulling us forward, pushing us forward with their contributions to culture, to production. They're passengers. Those are the folks that, for whatever reason, they're not inspired. They're getting the job done, but they're not really pulling us forward, but they're not pulling us back either. They're not burdens to the culture. They just might not contribute to the culture. They're not burdens to performance. They're just kind of average. And then there's anchors. And the anchors are the folks that just never get it. They never get the production. They are counterculture. They're agitators, and they hold everybody back. And I really feel like for every anchor, you lose the productivity of 2 to 3 engines. And so early on, I was an idealist. I wanted to make sure that everybody was with us for the rest of their lives. I wanted to create that kind of environment. What I figured out over time, and some of y'all probably figured this out already, is you can let somebody stay too long. And sometimes it is addition by subtraction. And sometimes it's your top performer that you're nodding your head. It's your top performer that is that cancer to your culture. And what I found is, when you try to turn those people around and they don't, and they're not humble anymore. They've gotten really proud of themselves, and they think that they can just be disruptive. When you let them go, it really does feel like the clouds went away, the sun came out, and everybody feels that, and your culture returns. And
we've been through this, like not even all that long ago, and didn't even realize it until like afterwards how much better everything felt.
Everybody's productionless.
Yeah.
Everybody else is productionless because the culture is strong, and so they offset that person that might have been a high performer.
People that are part of a culture and they have a mission that becomes greater than it's not a job for these people. Mm-hmm. And they don't look at it like 9 to 5, and it doesn't feel that way, and they'll do more because they care and they want to do more and they want to see it succeed, and they feel gratified when the whole team wins.
Yeah.
And when you have one person that's selfish and sucks that out, sometimes you can't even see it because a lot of times they are alpha salesperson, mm-hmm. But a lot of times they're exploiting the entire system to their benefit, which is weighing on other people very heavily. And those people won't tell you because you're the boss and you shouldn't be burdened with it.
Yeah.
And then you find out after they're gone how much damage they were doing.
Yeah.
So we've been through that. It's funny the way you said it. Like I was thinking about it already, and then you said something, and I was like, I was going to ask a follow-up question, but been through it.
Yeah.
That's actually golden information. Did you figure out any ways to identify them ahead of time? I guess going through some of that kind of a couple of times may.
Listen, when you're taking care of people, employees, clients, you've got a great reputation. People are proud to work there, and there's someone that's disruptive. You're going to hear about it. If you are present, as the owner or the leader of the business.
What you might do though is naysay if you feel like they're selling a lot, because you feel like the burden of losing them is great, but like you're saying, the burden of keeping them around is greater.
They bring everybody down. They are an anchor, and when you cut that anchor loose, everybody else just powers ahead. And I've just seen in every case that's happened, performance goes up across the board for everybody else. So you just end up with a better culture.
Yeah. I've seen it firsthand, and we're building. We're at 27 in-house W-2 team members, and I'm proud of that growth. And some guys that are in here that have gotten to 100 plus, and I know they've probably seen it over and over, because the bigger you get, probably the more you have to deal with that kind of stuff. But actually, Danielle's notorious. If you listen to her, every time I talk to her, she has a recurring theme of like, maybe you don't want a business the size of mine. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, you got to figure out what you want, where you want to get, and if you want to do that, great. But just know there's a lot of hurdles that you might get to a certain point and be like, okay, I liked where I was here. I'm not enjoying this. So but I really enjoy creating quality culture and seeing it. And sometimes you don't know what you enjoy until you do it. Yeah. And then when we've seen quality culture and then the team that's winning together mixed with the profit margin increasing, or the profit and the revenue in general increasing, it's like this perfect storm of being on the right ship, and everybody's rowing, and trying to make it get somewhere. So, well, look, man, obviously you don't have to be here. We really appreciate it. Everybody's, certainly grateful that you're taking the time, and, somebody that we aspire to just replicate the culture and the positive change you've brought to the industry. It is recognized. I don't feel like you sometimes talk like you're undeserving of it, but I think you are. And I think that some of these guys that aspired to be you, that have now built, huge businesses, would all attest to your character is beyond reproach, if that's the right use of that phrase. I'm not that smart, so I think it's beyond reproach.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for being here. Thank you,
absolutely.
to Sally, for
Absolutely.
being here.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, bud.